Yo, 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 yo. How is everybody?
Fine.
Outstanding. I am delighted. Cock-a-hoop, barnstormingly pleased to hear it.
How is your new
Nice that
life?
lanky turn up.
Oh, the other pole is back.
Never mind. Good things don't last forever.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Race Department Podcast, your favourite sim racing and motorsport related one at that. We are back once again for the Renegade Master. Hope you are all doing well and had a wonderful summer. Now that the weather has started to cool down, we have decided to get back into the hot seat. Now, I had planned on what we'd be discussing this week, but there were some cross wires and we somehow ended up doing another listener questions edition. So you have to wait a couple of more weeks to find out what that delicious thing I picked from the tree of topics. So now, it's time to introduce my fellow podcasters who have squeezed into the RD Virtual Studio. Firstly, the man who cannot seem to understand basic English and who wrote an article I didn't ask him to write. It's Mr. I'm all over the internet right now, Jeffrey.
Hey, I blame complete and utter miscommunication and a poor definition of the requirements needed. You asked me...
I do have evidence, audio evidence.
You asked me what I needed to write originally, like 3 weeks ago, and then sent me a message saying, just a reminder about that article. I'm like, I don't know what it is, so I'll just guess. It's all good.
You could have checked in with me.
I could have done, but I thought I'll throw the dice and see what happens. But hello, mate, and hello, everybody listening at home. Good to be back.
I love it. The mind of Paul Jeffrey, guys. The mind of Paul Jeffrey. Secondly, some say he loves Ferrari too much and he's easy to wind up on text. Who would do such a thing to Davide Nativo? Hello, Davide.
You can never love too much, Ferrari.
How are you?
Fine, mate. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Very good. Good to hear your voice. And at last but not least, do you know what? He said today that he would kindly buy us all the new Aston Martin sim rig, even though it costs more in euros and doesn't even include delivery costs. It's Danny Monteiro.
I don't recall having said that.
Well, I think he did, didn't he, guys? I recall him saying that.
Yeah,
He'd buy it for us.
Yeah, definitely.
You were not even here yet. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we have a lot of text conversations, especially when we're nearing a podcast recording. The conversation goes up, that's for sure. So this is season 2, episode 7. Would you believe? We did take a bit of a break, and to be honest, it's because it just gets so goddamn hot, and I really can't be bothered to sit in a hot room recording a podcast. And I know for Davide, he's still got his fans on, so it's still hot in good old Italy. So we did this before. I think we did this episode maybe 10 of season 1, where we did a questions session. So we got a few questions from our dear forum users. I've closed the thread off just before we started recording this, and I picked a few from the list. But the first one actually comes from our new Discord. Would you believe it? And it's from Michelle Esposito. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Apologies for getting that completely wrong. I do say I'm bad at pronunciations. He says, it would be interesting to discuss the contrast between people loving the GT4 in ACC and at the same time preferring always GT3 online. It seems to me that the enthusiasm for the multi-class racing in ACC has died a little. It's strange, and I think it's worth an interesting discussion.
Can I take that one? That's exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the question, because you actually broke into my house and picked that from my very brain. I'm going to do a video on it in the non-too-distant when I can find a few minutes spare to actually record. I am perplexed, absolutely perplexed. As anybody who watches RD YouTube will know, Race Department YouTube, I got hold of this along with a few other guys a little bit early, did a little bit of content about it, and did an online race with a few other YouTubers. Blown away by it. Absolutely mesmerised. Thought these cars are the definition of what superb looks like. They're just so much better than GT3s. They're incredible for racing. They're a bit slower, so I fully anticipated awesome online racing. And obviously, in an online world, you can do multi-class too, which is fabulous. Not in the offline, but in the online you can. Really, really stoked for it. They released. Everybody seemed to agree with me. They all went bonkers. Yeah, this is brilliant. They got Steam #1 sales charts for the week or whatever it was. Thought, yes, happy days. Then I've been a bit busy, so I've not really spent a lot of time driving, annoyingly. Fired up my rig. Thought, yeah, it's going to have me some GT4 racing. Nothing. Dead. All servers. GT4 specific servers, 3 people at Monza. Subtopic for another day. Stop picking Monza. It's annoying. Really gets on my nerves. What an awful online track. Stop it. But there were 3 people at Monza in a GT4, and that's basically the most I've ever seen in GT4 in the following weeks. And then I do multi-class, thinking, yes, going to get my Maserati out, do a last multi-class, 24 cars, happy days. I'm the only GT4. Why? Why? Because to me, it's really simple. All the ingredients are there. There's variety. The balance of performance is really good. The cars are all very, very different to drive, so there's something for every style. Audio, as you'd expect in ACC, beautiful. And they're a bit slower, and they're a bit more compliant, and they're happier to go side by side. So it brings tracks like Zolder and Brands Hatch, to a lesser degree the Hungaro Ring and Misano and stuff, brings it back into the fold as a usable racetrack. But nobody likes them, or nobody seems to take them online, and I don't get it. And in the early days when they did first come out, it's sent to encourage all the nutcases, like all the really mental, lousy drivers that just completely forget they're in a racing sim and they think they're doing a 3-lap hot lap race on Project Cars 3 or something. I had to get a little dig in there for P-Cars 3, by the way. For anybody who doesn't know me, I really despise that.
I did notice. I did clock that. You didn't. Now you just spelled it out, though. I
don't think in case it's missed. I don't like the subtlety. It's this. I am aware.
No, the subtlety is what you just. You got to keep with the subtlety. You don't spell it out for people.
I'm aware that there's people that English is not a first language, so I just want. I want my disdain for the game to spread throughout the world.
I don't think it needs just your disdain, but I think it's the whole internet.
No, I think
anyway.
they're doing a great job of that. But yeah. I genuinely don't know. And it's a topic that like I said, I want to do a video on it because it's genuinely intrigued me. It's one of those few occasions where I'm sort of, whoa, everything's there for it to be exceptional. But I don't get it. I mean, guys, anybody else here, what do you think of this? Because to me, I've genuinely not got the answer.
Yes, I have an idea, which is, a theory. Basically, everybody was super psyched. Like, oh my God, cool, GT4s, we can have multi-class. So everybody was multi-class will be so cool. But I think most people, first of all, I don't know if you've had a fast car yourself and then you suddenly have a slow car, or even worse, if you have to get the bus, you will hate it. And I think that's what happened to many people. First of all, when they tried GT4s, they're cool, but they're so much slower. It's much more fun to drive a GT3, so they just went back. And everybody that wanted wanted multi-class, basically, they just wanted everybody else, or a lot of people, to just drive GT4s to have multi-class, but they would still want to drive GT3s. So, but when everybody wants that, of course, it won't work. And that said, I've seen a few and been in a few GT multi-class races online, and it's been great. You did an
endurance race recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done a few. I've done 12 hours in a GT4 car, so that was mostly we didn't even care about where we were in GT4s. We were basically just trying to survive as much as we could, being overtaken by GT3s. That was the biggest challenge of the whole race. But that was a lot of fun, though. I really enjoyed it. So whoever's not taking part is basically missing out, because it's really great.
Yeah, because that's the bizarre thing, isn't it? I mean, I totally agree, Danny, that you're saying about people are used to the faster cars and get into the slower ones. It's not quick enough for them. But I thought that would be mitigated by just the sheer depth and quality of the handling and the physics of these GT4s. Yeah, you may be going 20k, 30k slower into a corner than in a GT3, and you may be braking 20, 30 metres earlier. But the feeling and the handling and the way that the car communicates with you, for me, is... I mean, this is controversial, but it's miles better than the GT3s in ACC.
Yeah, but most people just want to go fast, man.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if it feels okay or super nice. They just want to go fast, and GT4s are slow in comparison. So
that maybe,
I think that's the biggest reason.
Maybe, sir, you've just hit the mystery question nail on the head, because I definitely can't come up with a reason why. It's boggled me.
you can still make a video about it. Don't
Oh
worry.
yeah, sure.
I've got a confession to make. I bought the pack, and I've not raced any of the GT4s.
Get on
See?
Sim Racing
Perfect
GP.
evidence.
I'm sorry
my
about
theory.
that. And I really haven't had an opportunity to. I guess I could test them offline, but I haven't really had the opportunity to try them out in a competitive format. What I have taken part in though is I took part in a Porsche Cup round Spa, and that was epic. Everybody was racing the Porsche Cup, which is part of the same pack.
That's a great car, that one. That's one I've
And it's
overlooked.
a great car, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've been encouraging where I took part in the event to do another one because I thought it was brilliant. I personally thought I would get into that Porsche Cup and hate it. And for the first 4 laps, I think I did. But then I worked out how to handle the car, and it just meant some great close battles out on track. And it was just a great car. And it also gave me the feeling of achievement with that car, more so than the GT3s.
There's more to it, isn't there? And just to quickly clarify to everybody, the Porsche Cup is not part of the GT4.
Oh, sorry.
I overlooked that one because, again, I got the... was it version 1 that all the cars came to ACC, all the GT3s? I got early access to version 1, did some videos, and the Porsche...
Yeah, it was about the same time that the SRO stuff all kicked off,
I did a video with the Porsche Cup, and it was at Brands Hatch in the rain. And basically, all I did was a 5-minute gameplay video, and then totally overlooked it, and then never revisited it again at all. And I was talking to Jarier other week, and he's like, "Yeah, Porsche Cup's epic, man. It's proper good."
It really is an epic car.
I'll give it a go. I've not really.
But
wow.
that's a point there. You're right. It came with the original version 1 cars, but I thought it was part of GT4, and I'd never raced it until about 2 months ago.
It's difficult to find a reason though, because it doesn't come with 13 other different brand competitors. It's difficult to carve that time.
There is that. But you're right. When you go online, there aren't many places to kind of use the GT4s, but there are some good leagues out there which are starting to do multi-class racing.
Sim Racing GP.
And there's some also. Yeah, of course, they're harder to find than GT3s, of course, but there are some communities doing a Porsche Cup only championships with just the Porsche Cup cars. So that's also something you can, if you dig a little bit, you may find. But yeah, of course, they're much less used, but they're a lot of fun. I agree. I've had a few races and they're a hoot to drive. And to you, Paul Glover, if you have even less excuses than Davide for not playing the game because you have the GT4s and you haven't touched them, so I challenge you to do this. Just go into the game. You don't even need to drive. Just need to go to the game, pick the Maserati, go to any track, doesn't matter, and just rev your engine. You don't even need to start moving. Just rev the engine, and you will be like, "Oh my God, why haven't I done this?"
Yeah, I know. It's terrible. David, have you got anything to add?
No, basically it was
Because you don't own the game, right?
Yeah, that's one.
Which leads us to our next question, actually, quite nicely. Alex Townsend / the GT Formula wants to know, has Davide bought ACC yet?
No, man.
No, why not?
It's
been on offer, Davide.
Yeah, it was on sale during, not after this Team Summer sale. But, it was like 50% off. Yeah, the problem was that stop laughing.
Okay, I'll mute myself.
No, I opened the page, the Steam page.
Are you angry because of ACC, or are you angry because Ferrari are going backwards? Which is it?
Stop talking. Ferrari is gonna pick up the pace again, and it's gonna win 10,000 championships.
He's so easy. It's like child's play. But no, in all seriousness, why haven't you bought it?
Because the game was on sale, but the DLC was not. So I said I don't want to buy the game and then not have to play it. So I'll wait until the DLC is on sale too.
No helping some people, is there, guys? I mean,
that was basically my fault.
So, Davide, I think you should take the next question.
Okay.
It's more of a serious one, and I'll combine 2 of them. So we got a question from Bill Golker, which is also, his username is Billy Bob Senna. And he asked, what will sim racing look like in 5 to 10 years? But then Alex Townsend, he just asked if you bought ACC, also asked, where do you see, or where would you like to see RD in the next 5 to 10 years? He goes, I know we'll be a lot older, and I would still hope to be racing through the arthritis and the odd accident in the pants. But where would you think you would see, do you think people will still be playing ACC and classic content to keep the memories alive? Or do you think they'll be more interested in the modern stuff?
Okay, so the first question, the one about how sim racing will look like in 5 to 10 years. Yeah, I've actually read that on the forum some day ago, and I thought that I was the the least how can I say, let's say not the right person to answer this question, because if you would have asked me 5 years ago where would I have seen sim racing in 5 years, I had the idea that sim racing was going to be just some sort of bubble that was going to burst sooner or later, and instead I was proven completely wrong, because 5 years later sim racing is stronger than ever, and the future looks bright at this point.
Okay, so let me throw a kind of a curveball at you there. You're saying that I agree, we're in some kind of bubble still, I think, and I think potentially coronavirus has lengthened that bubble perhaps? Or do you think will help the bubble to grow and exist?
I think that we will see, depending on how the esports world in general, all of the games, not just sim racing, also, FPS and all of the other stuff that's in the esports world right now. That one is going to dictate how sim racing will fare too, I believe. I repeat, I may be not the right person to answer this question, but I think that it's gonna be the esport world that's gonna dictate how sim racing is gonna, if it's gonna be successful or not in the upcoming years.
But what about away from sim racing itself, and what about RD in particular?
About RD, of course, RD is very much tied to sim racing, of course. So the more sim racing will be successful and known and searched by people, the more RD will find richness and grow, of course. But at the same time, I hope that RD will be more and more an hub, a central hub for sim racer to meet, to discuss, to race one another. I think that what I hope for RD is to be some sort of place where sim racers from all over the world can meet and share their mutual passion. Because for me, the beauty of RD has been exactly that. People like you, for example, and much more people with each one of them having their specific background, their story, and their specific talent, and get to know them and get them to know me. So I think that people is the treasure of RD, and I hope that much more will come to us and enrichen the forum.
I think RD's will probably change. When you see the launch of like Sim Racing GP.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And other sites that are out there, potentially RD will just become more community based.
Yeah, and
then you'll have these platforms that perform the racing duties that we would do potentially manually before that.
Yeah, and that's what I hope. I mean, a place where people can come and say, I want to play Assetto Corsa, I want to play race room, I want to play Automobilista, to each their own, but at the same time being all in one spot, because, we all share the same passion and we get to do it together. So that's what I hope for the future of RD.
Yeah, it's good to see Paul Jeffrey paying attention when he's updating articles on the website. Busted!
No.
Danny, have you got anything to add to the 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, like David said, it's a bit hard to know. I agree with the fact that the race department will continue to thrive, but more as a hub for people to get together and share. But yeah, racing wise, it might. I think we've seen with simracing GP and other platforms that the racing is going into other platforms, into other new ways of gathering people together. But I think the website has been and is strong enough to keep on going and getting people together.
Yeah, but especially the downloads, the mods just alone. I mean, it brings so much traffic.
Yeah, I guess that's the main thing. And then, but then sim racing as a whole, I don't know, because even with the bonus that sim racers have had with the coronavirus and all this, with the lockdowns and people getting into it. It will just grow like everything grows, but I don't think it will grow more than, say, other types of games, or I think it'll just have a normal, steady growth. Because if you think about it, like, okay, let's say, sometimes I think, I wish instead of liking motorsport, I would just like football a lot more, because I would just have to buy some boots and a football, and that's much cheaper than spending thousands and hundreds of thousands in car and testing and so on. But then you think, okay, but I have sim racing, that's cheap enough. But then if you start comparing sim racing with other kinds of video games, if you don't think about a gamepad, but if you think about a wheel, even an entry price wheel, sim racing is actually one of the most expensive games to get into, video games. So I don't think it will grow exponentially. No, I think it will continue to grow just at the same rate, and it will still continue something quite specific that only us that like to simulate racing do. But it'll stay as strong as it is now and grow, but not like massively, but still going strong, I think.
All right, cool. I'm not going to come to you, Paul, on that, because I feel like you'll go on for about half an hour. We've got to move on.
Yeah, good shout, fella. Good shout.
Yeah. So, next, sorry, Davide, one last thing.
Yeah, I was thinking while Danny was talking. One thing that maybe I would like RD to do is some sort of Sim Racers Academy. Because when we were in the coronavirus quarantine period, we were talking about, I remember Paul Jeffrey talking about the fact that, the attention was going over to the professional drivers and we sim racers that enjoy this and make this world, the world of sim racing happening, where we were basically ignored 90% of the time. What if RD could host some sort of Sim Racers Academy, a place where we can find talents in, those that we call aliens, and have them grow, have them participate in races.
You mean basically launch like an esports team?
Yeah, of sort, but not just fixed on specific, 3 drivers and that's that, but active in searching for new talents.
I think the resource required to do that would be a lot. I mean, if you want to take the job on, by all means, but I haven't got time for that. No offense, people out there, but it would take a lot of time, a lot of coordination, a lot of resource. Mostly time, really. Would you agree with that, Paul? It would take a lot of effort to pull something like that together.
Yes, but then you've got platforms like Sim Racing GP that are absolutely prime to be able to do that sort of thing, because you can see the statistics and performance and engagement of drivers.
Yeah.
So the old-fashioned way of having a cohort of X number of drivers, putting them through the paces, assessing them with judges is one thing, but we live in a very data-rich society now, and especially with sim racing and online competition in particular, that data's there, and depends what you want to do with it. And I think maybe there will be some exciting initiatives very similar to what Davide mentioned around SGP that I just don't want to go down that route we're talking about, because it's way too early to have those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of that depends on what information the games themselves chuck out, right, as well.
Yeah, of course.
What is potentially possible on a platform like that. But I mean, I have been doing races on Sim Racing GP, in a league, and it's great to see the information at the end. There's more to come from what I've read, which I'm really looking forward to, and there's more that other places can currently do at the moment around the statistics, but I think they're just concentrating at the moment trying to keep the platform, making sure the platform's reliable and testing new features and whatnot, and eventually I'm sure the stats they'll be able to kick out will be beyond epic. So I'm excited for the future of that. Right, okay, so next question. This comes from Jacob C62. Let's see who wants to take this one. Let's imagine that Codemasters has everything they need to create a NASCAR title to go alongside their F1 series without sacrificing the quality of either game. What would, in your opinions, Codemasters have to bring to the table, not only to produce a game that NASCAR fans would choose over the Heat series, but also attract sim racers who might not even have an interest in NASCAR in real life? For example, he says, I personally feel as though dynamic rivalry system, or if you prefer fluid real-time and similar synonyms, would have to be in place similar to the one used in EA titles in the mid-2000s. Paul's put his hand up. Let's go to him.
The short version, and I will do the long, serious version afterwards. The short version is for Codemasters to produce a NASCAR game better than NASCAR Heat 5 or 6, whatever it was.
Wouldn't take much, would it?
It's basically don't produce a steaming pile of turd, and then you've won. So I have flushed things down the toilet that arguably are better than NASCAR Heat 6. It was awful. Like, not awful as in, oh, I don't like it, so I'm going to call it awful. It was awful as in, objectively, this is awful. Should never have been released.
It's basically, if I remember rightly, looking at your review, Paul, it's a game console port to PC.
But a poor one. And they haven't even changed the menu options, so you don't know what buttons to press. There's points in the game where it's quite literally press button 427DF squared.
To be fair, that's what F1 games tend to have in common, actually, the button.
But if you do press a button on the F1 games, it then brings you the equivalent PC button.
It does, yes, it does.
It's awkward, and it's poor on the F1 games as well, but in NASCAR, it's simply not thought through. It's not been any thought to it at all. But that aside, the actual core game is awful anyway. So the force feedback is, and I am no technical guru, so I might be speaking a little bit out of turn here, but it's like X input devices. So they've not even configured it for a force feedback steering wheel. What they've done is they've patched in some generic software out there that says, by doing this equates to a left-hand turn, and this equates to a right-hand turn. So there's no linearity or development skill in going into making it into a force feedback. It could be a piece of cardboard with a spring on it. The system doesn't know. It's offensive how poor it was. So to answer the question in detail, I've said this a load of times, and I like NASCAR. I'm a NASCAR fan. I'm based in the UK. I don't have Premier Sports or BT Sports, so I don't get to see the races live. So my watching of NASCAR has reduced hugely in the last few years, but I'm still very much a fan, and I love the discipline of oval racing. So to produce a game that's NASCAR-centric, but in the same vein as Formula One, the 2020 Formula One, which I think personally is a fabulous title, and I'm still playing it today, which surprises me. If they could produce that in a NASCAR space, then they're golden. So what NASCAR Heat does really well is bump drafting and drafting partners, either inside your team or people that you've had a good experience with in the past. That's really, really smart. But the rest of it loses. So if you can replicate that, if you can have the fact where you've got like the user submitted, some element of dynamic rivals where if you've had a big shunt with somebody, they don't like you and they'll hang you out to dry or won't help you. But you've got teammates and people that you've played nicely with in the past, and they'll come off the pack and do some pack racing with you so you're not hung out, or they'll bump draft or tow you, and you can do a little bit exactly what NASCAR is. I mean, essentially, it's a 500-mile race where 475 miles aren't important, and then the final run to the flag is. If they can replicate that, but in the realism traded off with ease of access that Formula One is, got yourself a real winner. Got yourself a real winner, because even people who aren't NASCAR fans if they're motorsport fans, I'm sure they would enjoy the pack racing aspect of racing on an oval if it was presented to them in an accessible yet still semi-realistic way, just like Formula One is, maybe with a bit of a career element around it as well. I can only imagine the multi-choice questions that you've got when you cross the line. Insert your 10,000 sponsor names and God to thank for the end of this race. That'd be awesome. You're going to press it really quick. I'd like to thank my Miller Lite Chevrolet Corvette Racing, Penske, Team Miller Driving, Esso Formula thing, and my family for this victory. That'd be awesome. Pressing all the buttons really quick to get it. But yeah, I think there could be a real winner, real winner, if they pick up the mantle and do it. But whether they do or not is an entirely different question.
Yeah, I don't know if it's got the same kind of market.
I think in the US it would, because the US it's massive.
Not worldwide. I think that's where because F1 in the US isn't necessarily as big as it is across Europe, right?
And that's the thing, though. That's what
it's kind of flipped on his
my
head
problem a little bit with studios such as Codemasters. And I'm not criticising, because I totally understand that they've got to make as much profit as they possibly can.
Going after the coin, buddy.
And you see things like Riser Studios for AMS and Studio 397 for R Factor and Kunos and all the hardcore, shall we say, sims. They could make a hell of a lot more money if they produce a third-person shooter or a console game like Project Cars have gone down. But they do it because they want to make enough money to put food on the table and have a nice life, but not become billionaires out of it. Whereas Codemasters are going for the long game of more accessible for everybody and selling more units, basically, making more money. If you made a quality NASCAR game, in the US alone, you would earn a crust.
Yeah, you're right.
Let's just put some of those resources and skills and
or IndyCar as well. An IndyCar one would be banging.
Yeah, to be fair, you can apply that to pretty much any series that's currently half decent. But if they could just make a good NASCAR game, get it out of the mediocrity that it's in now, you're not going to lose money as a studio. You're not going to go into debt. You're going to make a few bob. You can probably buy yourself a nice Porsche, but you're not going to make tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions that they make with Formula One, and that's fine. Surely, let's help the industry and give fans... End of the day, NASCAR fans are a very loyal bunch of people, especially in North America, and they've not had a game that warrants their level of dedication for the sport. And that, frankly, as a fan of motorsport, it's a shame. It saddens me that they've not had what they deserve, which is, aside from the NASCAR content in iRacing, but that's a bit different because it's the models, but not necessarily the whole series experience.
The license, yeah.
They've not had what they deserve, and they deserve a NASCAR game, pure and simple. They deserve it as much as a Formula One fan does, and I'd like to see that happen.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I feel like that Paul's done that one to death, so we'll move on because I'm conscious.
It's been a while since we've done one of these, and I just want to talk.
I know. It's okay, mate. It's all right. It's okay. So I mean, it's not as if you haven't been talking everywhere else for God knows how long doing your commentary, and you're still chatting away now. Okay. So let's see if Davide or Danny want to take this one. This is from Mantas Iskanastis. I've got no idea. Will the historic content appeal completely vanish from sim racing in the future? Who's taking that one?
I couldn't find the unmute button.
Problem between keyboard and chair, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, first of all, I think that the name is Mantas Isganitis because it's
okay, thank
Greek.
you. Yeah, I'm British, you know. I'm a typical Brit. We're terrible when it comes to pronunciation.
I mean, to be fair, Paul, you're a southerner, so you can't even pronounce English words. Where's the R in Bath?
Ooh.
Where is the R in Bath or glass?
Or
lasagna?
Shut
Where
up.
is it? Tell me.
Shut
Tell
up,
me
leg.
now.
I mean, a man that has a hair in the state of yours has got no leg to stand on. So go to the barbers. Sorry, Davide.
Don't worry. Okay, the question was the one about historic content.
Yeah, do you think historic content will completely vanish from sim racing in the future?
It's hard to say because it depends on what we consider as historic, as Mantas explained in a later post. Because if we talk about historic content in general, no, of course it won't vanish because cars from, for example, the 80s, 90s, or early 90s, they will become historic content at some point. Or even, a 2020 F1 car, it will become historic content at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
But, for example, cars from the 20s or 30s, they are historic content, but you don't see any developer making one for their sims. We see barely just some modder making some, but you can count them on the finger of one hand. So, for example, as Mantas was saying, cars from the 60s may become, may vanish, disappear, or become not popular anymore in the future at some point. That's something that indeed might happen. It all goes with the generations that live in a way and that play seems in a more specific sense. Because
I think you just hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. Because, for example, I grew up watching the movie Grand Prix, that is revolving around the 1966 F1 season.
Yeah.
So I love those cars. But if you talk to the majority of the people of my age, which is 30 years old now, they do prefer the cars from the 90s onwards. So if it was for them, there was no need for cars from the 60s or 70s in Sims. So I think that, for example, 20 years from now, might be very well that no one will be interested in a car from the 60s, 70s.
Okay, so what about if I throw this at you then? So we're all talking about, we look at Formula E and we look at cars on the roads these days. I did an article a few months ago about, is it time now to buy an EV?
Mm-hmm.
In, say, 20 years' time, racing may not be using a combustion engine. So to get anywhere near what a combustion engine may have sounded like or even feel like to drive, you might have to turn to a sim.
You make me think of an article that I've read some time ago in which the writer was saying that it is likely that in the future combustion engines or cars with in which something explodes inside might become just like now is riding an horse, because he was saying, a century ago, to move from point A to point B, if there was a considerable distance in between, you had to take an horse, and they were everywhere on the streets. Nowadays, you don't see any. The only people that have an horse is farmers, if they need one, or most likely people that ride them for sport. So combustion engines might become just a sport in the future for, not just rich people, because, of course, like, for example, caring for a horse requires a lot of money, but there are not extremely rich people that can afford it. So it might become possible for a large group of people to maintain a car with a combustion engine. But still, it will become some sort of a niche sport of sorts. And at the same time, you're right that sim racing might become a way to preserve them as some sort of virtual museum, we can say, for people that do not want to invest the money of having to buy one and use that just for single events, things of the like. I don't know. I hope that my thought was clear enough. My idea was clear enough. I don't know. You tell me. Otherwise, I try to make a short version.
It makes sense. I do. You just made me think about. I think it might have been Porsche that released a VR experience where you could walk around like a Porsche museum.
Yeah, with the very condensed version of the Targa Florio. Please, someone do the entire version. All of the... No, not Targa Florio, the Mille Miglia.
Yes, please do a full one, somebody, please.
1,600 kilometers long. It was Porsche that made some sort of virtual museum of their cars and the most important races in which they won. So
because I think you're right when you talk about the age thing. Because obviously, if you sat my dad down and you were like, oh, what car kind of gets him kind of excited would be completely different to me. When I was growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Kids had the Lamborghini Countach on their walls.
Yeah.
And
now they have
different generations, and
now they have the LaFerrari, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some would argue probably not as lively as the Lamborghinis of old, but yeah.
Yeah, true.
Oh, Paul, what's the problem?
Nothing.
My pronunciation.
Nothing. I shall remain silent and just chuckle slightly to myself.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That looked like you had a swear in it.
Countach.
Countach.
Yeah, that's
Countach.
right.
Lamborghini
Yeah.
Countach.
It's fine.
A Brit telling another Brit how to pronounce.
I know, and ironic
words.
that I
That's
should be telling anyone to pronounce anything because I am awful at pronunciation.
Oh yeah, but I held my hands up and I admit that I am terrible. And even when somebody tells me how to pronounce something correctly, I don't repeat what I hear.
I'm like the episode of Friends where Joey's trying to learn French. And Phoebe says, "Je m'appelle Joey." I'm like that.
Oh, what a great episode! Oh, one of the best TV shows
and
ever.
Still amusing and entertaining today, despite the fact I've seen every episode a million times.
There's another TV show that I'm currently rewatching on Netflix, which I've just forgot how hilarious it is, and I'm watching that back at the moment. Okay. Thank you, David. I think you covered that extensively. I think that was a good one for you.
Thank you. I hope I was not too much confused.
No, you're good, mate. You're good. Okay, so I'm going to botch another name here. Vil Niemann. Yeah, so here we go. When talking about how force feedback feels, what is your usual preference for it? He says, those who race in real life can obviously compare force feedback to the real thing on track, but what about others? That's a really good question.
That's a deep question, that one, isn't it? Ooh,
yeah.
A question with no right answer.
Because, I've done go-karting, for instance. I've not raced a Formula 1 car in real life or a GT3 car. How do I know what I'm feeling, Danny? Is the right thing?
Yeah, the thing is, everybody has an opinion about it, but
exactly,
almost nobody knows. And there's a second thing, which is, even if you take, let's say, as of today, the latest, let's imagine, because we don't even know for sure, but let's imagine that ACC is the game that best models a GT3 car nowadays. Let's take one of those cars, and let's say somebody that drove, let's say, an Audi. Let's say an Audi driver has a try with an Audi on ACC GT3, and he has whatever super high-end, high-tech wheel that gives a lot of feedback information on the wheel. But of course, as we all know, they're missing information about the G-forces and so on. And then there's a huge gap of information that you lose because ACC is modeling one type of tires, one only, with data that is supplied by, in this case, Pirelli, which, of course, for those who don't know, tire data is like black magic. It's just
We did have a question about tire modules, but I decided to exclude that because I thought that would take us down a complete dark rabbit hole.
I'll steer away from the rabbit hole and just say that basically it's like you have, like Jeremy Clarkson says, you do like boom, boom, boom magic and something comes out. But even the people that do like the Pajeca models and those things, it only works up to a certain amount of slip angle, and then after that, all the data can't be reliable because of rubber is something that changes all the time. So a game will never be good enough to represent the car.
And before you get into the flow with this question, I've got a friend of mine, and it's a bit this kind of relates to your comment about force feedback, like it's a preference thing. So I got a friend of mine who I recently got into sim racing. I've mentioned him before, and I don't want to embarrass him, but he basically tells me that iRacing is better than ACC when it comes to handling and tyres.
But he's not wrong, and you're not wrong either.
Yeah, I know. Everybody listening, I know he's a moron. I get it. He's a moron.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
What?
I'll tell you. You're wrong. Well, I mean, you're not right by thinking the opposite, but he's not, like, nobody's wrong, you see. How
he is wrong. He is wrong. He's wrong. He's allowed. I can make him wrong.
Okay, if to you he's been like, that's fine. I don't know him, so that's not my point. But the thing is, like, the games will behave differently. But how would you know, for example, that, let's say, from our limited knowledge, okay, iRacing has modeling a total different type of tire, and I've heard this before on imagine GT3, okay, the Nürburgring 24 hours, any tire manufacturer is allowed there. So you see, let's take an Audi, which is a car that is used a lot. There's a lot of customer teams with it. There's Audis with Hankook tires, Michelin tires, Pirelli tires, Bridgestone tires. I don't know if there's any. I think Falcon didn't have tires, but imagine the same car with 4 different types of tires. And there was, I think it was Christopher Mies, is a professional Audi driver. He was saying that they all behave completely differently, and like some are real
based on the tires.
Yeah, the car, it's like a different car in some aspects. So there right away you can say, well, there's no better game or better physics if the tire model alone can be a factor to change the behavior of the car completely. And so if you put on top of that force feedback with different types of wheels, with different settings,
bases,
so
yeah,
it's completely subjective. It can never, like, it's at the end of the day, it's down to feeling how many times you need to fiddle with the settings until your brain says, okay, I've fiddled enough, and now I like it, and now I'm going to enjoy it. That's when it's right for you, basically.
Okay. Davide?
Basically I agree with Danny, because he was making the tires example that the same car with 4 different sets of tires, the same car with 4 different sets of tires has completely different behavior, and each and every one of us can experiment that when you, for example, change the tires on your car. Same season, so of course not summer tires and winter tires, which of course are very different, but summer for summer, winter for winter, you change with a new set of tires.
Oh, is that how it works? I didn't know that.
What? When you're...
I was being sarcastic, don't worry.
Oh, come on.
The amount of disdain in Davide's voice when Paul made that joke was outstanding. That's the highlight of my working day. Thank you, sir.
No, because I was thinking you don't know what a winter tire is.
No, I was messing. We do. We don't really use them in the UK though, do we, Paul? They're not really a thing here.
I've never used winter tyres. No, because I like having no grip. It's fun. It pleases me. I'm one of these people where it snows and people stay in and you've got weather warnings.
Unlike places like Sweden and Norway, etc., we don't get the extreme weather.
We just get lousy weather all the time, so there's no point.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And there are times where I look at my car and go, oh, I wish I had winter tyres. It'd be a lot better. But like, you'd need them for like 2 days a year. So, and it's a lot of money to fork out. But I guess that, but it's also not just the snow and the ice. It's also the road temperature in general. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, David, I've taken that down another hole.
Don't worry. No, I was saying every one of us can experiment what different tires feel like when your tires have become old and worn out, and you change them for a fresh set. As soon as you drive the car, it feels completely different. So Dan is right in that regard. And he's right that every sim provides a different feeling for force feedback and, for physics and so on. So at the end of the day, we can say that this one is more realistic than the other one and so on and so forth. But I think that, as Danny is saying, you have to try them all if you can, of course, because they cost money. Try as much as many of them as you can, and at the end of the day, stick with the one that you feel better with, in a sense. That how can I say it? That when you drive it. You feel that it is the right sim for you. It's different. I felt it when I first drove Assetto Corsa. I immediately felt that it was giving me exactly the feeling of the car that I was looking for. For another person, it could be for a race room or for your friend with the iRacing. I think that you have to stick with one that you feel gives you more fun, or in other words, you feel better when you drive it.
I mean, my friend in question, I think I have converted him though, because he is currently he's been texting me and a couple of mates that have got into I've managed to get a couple of friends into sim racing this year, and he's currently practicing Bathurst in ACC. So I think he's kind of realised that I'm right and he's wrong, which is great. Thanks. Puts a big smile on my face. But yeah, Paul also, has made a valid point. Not verbally though. Tyre pressures also affect the way the force feedback handles and how a car behaves as well. Especially, I did a race recently, and the race was at, where was it? Was it Barcelona? I think it was Barcelona. And for some reason, the track at 8 o'clock in the morning was 36 degrees. Well, I thought it would have been a lot cooler than that. And so I had my pressures slightly higher than I wanted. And the handling of the car compared to the first race was terrible. It was noticeably worse. And I just had no grip.
Setups and tyre pressures make a huge difference. So
and I know what I'm aiming for. And I will do a few practice sessions to kind of the PS. If it's only just a couple of PSI, it's not bad. But if it's like whole PSI
even just
out,
to the whole
then you do
force
notice
feedback of the cars. If we remember back a couple of 3-4 years ago, maybe there was I forget their name now. Gentleman Racers did it for R Factor 2, the big massive endurance series mod. Forget the name of the company now, but they did the big endurance series mod where they had prototypes and GT cars and the Flat 6, which was the Porsche Cup cars. And when it first came out, Race Department were running it as the content. Enduro Racers, that's it, David, thank you. They were running it in the Race Department Le Mans series, and I wasn't competing for time, but one of the guys on staff, Damien Patel, his team, says, can I just have a run on the server in your prototype, see what I think of it? And I went on with stock setup, and I immediately thought, wow, this mod is awful. The handling's way off. It just does not feel nice or realistic. It's a rubbish mod. And then Damon gave me his setup, changed it completely, changed the way the car behaved, the force feedback. The default setup felt like it had that phenomenon where the car steers from the middle almost, which is very much like Project Cars and sadly AMS2 as well. Put my setup on it, my force feedback changed, the weight changed, the handle of the car changed, and it became an exceptional piece of content. So there's all sorts, like you said, there's hardware, there's physical car setup, there's the detail car setup as well. Caster settings can change the weight of your wheel, can change the feedback through your wheel. So there's so many variables, and if any one of those variables are off, then that's going to give a polar opposite driving experience from one man to the next, or one person to the next, man, woman, child, whatever. And that was never more apparent to me than the Ender Racers mod. Put a proper setup on there, and that car came alive, and it had gone from what I considered to be terrible to being arguably, certainly at the time, probably the best mod for R Factor 2 out there. And as you well know, as I've said many times before, when it sings, R Factor 2 is the best sim out there as well for me. So that was a beautiful combo.
Yeah, well, we'll take all comments around R Factor 2 with a pinch of salt these days, Paul, though, won't we?
I have no bias. I separate those two jobs very firmly, firmly.
Of course, do. We'll go on.
For anybody who's listening, buy R Factor 2. It's amazing. Buy it twice, actually. That'd be even better. And then say Paul told you to do it. That'd be amazing.
Right. Okay. See what I've just started there. Okay. All right. So, some great stuff there around the force feedback. Good discussion. Okay. Next one from LN Progress, which is a username on the forum. As EV road car manufacturers continue to innovate and global motorsport slowly evolves to embrace it with official series, what are some new approaches simulators can take to build up EV racing experiences? Now, there aren't many games that have EV-based cars, but we are aware that the game that we just talked about, R Factor 2, does have a mod.
It has official content.
For Formula
official
E,
content.
We've
got 2018, 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, official content. Sorry, that's what I meant. I knew it was official content. I don't know why I said mod. And I haven't driven it. I haven't bought it and I haven't driven it. And there's one reason is because the tracks don't appeal to me more than anything else. But the idea of actually racing a Formula E car or any other EV car, it doesn't not appeal to me in the slightest. Like I would drive it and probably have some really good races.
Do you know what? And I know I'm going to get criticism for allegedly being biased, and I'm really not. I am professional enough to put.
But you've said this before about Formula E content.
I'm not a fan of Formula E. It's not because I don't like electric racing, although I do strongly prefer combustion engines. It's just I don't like the concept. Slow Formula cars on difficult to overtake tracks where there's a lot of contact. It doesn't ring my bells.
The tracks do let it down, in my opinion.
And the cars are too slow to go on other tracks. So I get the whole concept. It's just not my bag. So traditionally, I'm not really that excited about it. But I'm also a sod for buying loads of content for Sims. I can't help it. So I got the Formula E cars. And honestly, they're beautiful. And I think, to me, what that tells me is if a good piece of content is a good piece of content, for me personally, I'm a racing fan. So if it's a formula or a series or a championship I'm not particularly invested in the real world, good content's good content and racing is racing. So actually, for me, in R Factor 2, Formula E is one of the best sim racing experiences you can get. And I would love, if I had time in a different life, to do a championship in that with people that are really talented enough not to be bouncing off the walls every 30 seconds. I think that would be a fabulous experience, because the handling of the cars is great, the modelling's lovely. I enjoy the lift and coast and regen battery element as well. That's an aspect that's a bit different. And then turning up the power of your battery, which makes a massive difference. If you have it on a low setting and you put it on a high, you're fine 3 seconds, but you burn high all the time, you'll run out of juice before the race is over. But it's more dramatic than fuel mixture in a combustion engine car. I think the whole package is really, really good. And for me, pound for pound, it's one of the best bits of content.
You know why it's more challenging than a car that runs on fuel, right? Because when you're in a normal road car, right, and you are cruising at 70 mile an hour, you can ease off the throttle and you improve the miles per gallon. In an electric car, the motors just have to keep running at that speed, so they use a lot more power.
So braking performance.
Electric cars are less economical when they're going at speed.
And also in a Formula E car.
And combustion engines are more economical.
And in a Formula E car, the longer your braking distance is, the more that'll recharge the battery for you. So there's lift and coast, but there's also extending your brake. This is counterintuitive, but it's a fact. Extending your braking distance without slowing you down. So rather than going like 100% brake at 80 meters, go 60% brake at 100 meters and then feed it in. And that's an art in itself. That's a very different driving experience. And
I was about to say, that's a completely different driving style to what other racers would use, right?
Low end because it's battery, so it's instantaneous. So you can't floor it on the exit of the corner. You've got to you're feeding the braking, you're feeding the throttle, and you're dancing on the pedals a heck of a lot more than you are in a combustion engine Formula car. And for some people, that's your bag. Some people, it's not. But for me, that combination on a tight street circuit just resonated for me. And I've really, really, to the point where I've actually bought there's a modder out there that does paid content, and they've done the Jaguar I-Pace trophy cars as well. And I actually bought
I was going to ask if that's out there yet.
It's a modder, so it's not official content. I dare say it's not licensed, so it's moderately dubious that the fact they're selling it. So I'm not campaigning for people to go do that, because that's a grey area. But you do that if you so wish, and I personally have. And that's also really nice. It's a very different driving experience compared to the Formula E, because they're SUVs, as you would expect. But there's that. The R Factor 2 in Formula E, they've got a bunch of tracks, official content, laser scan jobbies. And there's also a guy out there on Steam Workshop that's basically, I think he's done 19 or something. So basically, almost every Formula E track that's ever been in existence is available. And I think Studio 397 indicated that they're in the last roadmap, they're bringing out the attack mode, which is a bit Mario Kart. And again,
I quite like that, though.
It's an innovation, isn't it? It's an innovation. It's something a bit. I don't like it in racing. I despise the idea of attack mode, but it's something different. It's a new aspect to a sim that we've not had before. So, yeah, interesting. And that actually kind of ties into the original question, that EV racing, electric racing, certainly from R Factor 2's point of view, eventually it will have brought attack mode, which is something new that wouldn't have been in the sim before. It's brought some modelling in the electric drivetrain unit that, again, wouldn't have been in there before. So it's brought innovations into the simulation, which will eventually filter out to all sims, I'm sure. So it's brought a new element. And what I love about sim racing, and PC sim racing in particular, where you can expand it much greater than a console, where we live in a world of DLCs and mods, it brings a new experience to the race driver that's more than we had 10 years ago, where basically you had Formula GT and Touring and that's your bag, and they're all much of a muchness. Now we can race a bit of anything, and I say I'm not a Formula E fan, but I love getting in a Formula E car around New York City for something just totally different. And that's why I love sim racing, that I can fire this game up, any game pretty much. I can race a Group C sports car from the 80s, I can race a 1920s Bentley mod in AC if I wish, modern top-level GT3 racing, electric racing, and basically everything on the spectrum in between. And that, to me, is why I'm so proud and pleased to be in sim racing, because as a petrol head that sadly hasn't got millions to spend doing it in real life, sky's my limit. I can do what I want. And the mods are getting, and the developers and the software is getting more and more advanced, seemingly every month. That 5 years ago, we didn't have four-wheel drive, we didn't have hybrids, or any of that sort of tech. We've got that now, to the point where we're actually getting diminishing returns, and we're going for the real detailed stuff that the vast majority of the audience won't even acknowledge and recognise. That turns me on. I like stuff like that. I'm a very simple guy, and things like that please me. Suspension wobble, drivetrain wobble. I like stuff like that. Most people don't care, but end of the day, it's a bit dirty sim racing, and you can go for the easy access stuff if you want, if you just want the privilege of having a race. But I like as close to a one-to-one replication of real world as possible, and all developers, to a lesser or greater extent, are getting there slowly but surely. So tying back into the where are we in 5 or 10 years question, it's only going to get better. It's only going to get more realistic, I think.
I think you're right. Dave, you got something to say?
Yeah, I hope that I get the question from One Progress that we are discussing about right. But I wanted to say that the thing about building the experience or the interest around EV cars, I think that the problem with electric vehicles is not really the engine, but the car. Because if you take a car that, for example, for me, handles like something starting from the 50s up to the 90s, so a car that likes to oversteer, four-wheel drift, and so on, and you give it an electric engine, I don't mind, because it's lots of fun. The problem with electric vehicles nowadays is that most of the time it's what some would say a soulless engine in a soulless car, because it's the engine is not making any particular noise and the car is glued to the ground for aerodynamic reasons. But as soon as you give the car a proper character, the electric engine becomes fun, because that's what makes a car fun. The way it handles, not just the sounds it makes.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that to a point, yeah.
So, going back to the question, what can simulators do to build around the EV experience? I think that what they need to do is just get the experience right. I mean, replicate every detail of those cars, because that's, for example, what seems like iRacing or Assetto Corsa apart from others when it comes to hybrid engines, because they simulate, if not all of the aspects, most of the aspects of an hybrid engine, the battery, the storing of the energy, deployment of the energy, different profiles, and so on and so forth. So if Sims will do the same with electric engines, replicating them as realistic in the most realistic way possible. That's all they can do. It's not their job to make the car more interesting. That's the car manufacturer's job. So
or the championships.
Or the series in which there is. So that the sims have to do, in my opinion, is just get the simulation spot on for every aspect of how these cars behave, which is completely different from an IC engine, just as an hybrid engine is different from a sim.
You've made another good point there. What's going on tonight?
It's a really good night. I think.
Something's up.
We can tell we've had a break. We're all refreshed.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just conscious of the time. Moving on. Username Axel Ralamori. How long is the perfect lifetime for a sim? And will motion sims be as mainstream as force feedback wheels are today, do we think?
Forever.
Interesting.
No. Okay.
Well, the motion sims, unless they get down to the price of the wheels are today, I think it's going to be a bit of an investment to do for the casual.
Be a long
sim
road,
racer.
won't it? I mean, I see, especially on RD in the hardware forum, which I do dip into from time to time.
Yeah, the thing.
A lot of the motion stuff you see is custom made because it makes it cheaper.
But even with cost, motion's massive. So even if motion came down to €200, which it never will, because that's ridiculous, but even if it did, it became imminently affordable to the majority. Ideally, you need a hard standing floor, so anybody that's upstairs in their man cave, not happening for you, sunshine. No. And you need some real estate to get it into, because it's not small. Even the most compact offerings are still a percentage larger than your average rig. So just by its nature, I don't think it can ever become mainstream unless we all buy massive bungalows in the future, and then you're laughing.
Okay. There you go. So bungalow sales are on the up.
Or you live in America where seemingly everybody's got humongous houses, which is... So that's also an option, because England, like the price per square foot of land is probably like 10,000 times greater than any other country in the world, so it ain't going to happen for us. Unless my wife becomes really, really, really... like friendly towards me and lets me take the living room, and she has the living room in the man cave. That'd work, but that's not going to happen.
That's really not going to happen.
And then I've got to find 10 grand to buy a motion rig, which also ain't going to happen.
Danny, how long do you think is the perfect life for a sim?
It depends. I mean, as you see, AC1 is still going strong, right? So it really depends on the sim.
Okay, so if you buy a game, so the model seems to be now you buy a game. We'll take ACC as an example, because that's one of the more recent ones that's bought. You buy the game as it's being developed.
Well, for me it will be when I get tired of it. If there's no new content, of course, I will get tired of it earlier. If there's new stuff coming out, it will be fine. If you look, also there's been a factor of, for example, the reason why R Factor 1 especially lasted so long was because R Factor 2 took a while to come out, and there was not really any alternative until AC1 came out, 6 years after that. So after R Factor 1 was released, or more.
And what keeps AC1 going is the modding community.
Sorry?
The modding community keeps AC1 going.
Just like the modding community kept R Factor 1 going, even after R Factor 2 came out, because it was much harder to mod. So it depends. If it's modding friendly, of course, it'll stay alive for much longer. But if not, it'll depend on the amount of content that comes out. And if it's like a franchise of a yearly thing, like the Formula 1 games, then it'll just last a couple of years.
So that's Danny there with a politician's answer. He answered the question without actually answering the question. I like it.
Depends. The answer is always it depends. Depends on the type of game and what it can offer, basically.
David A, what are your how long do you think a sim, if you're buying a sim, how long do you want it to be, do you think it should kind of lifespan? What do you think?
Of course, when you spend money on something, you hope that it will last as long as possible. So that goes also for a sim. But it depends on how the sim has been built. So something modular, like for example the original Air Factor or Assetto Corsa, so AC1, can last 20 or even more years, depending on the support it gets from modders and the fact that it can be is supplanted a word when you replace something. I don't know. Maybe it's not English. So let's.
I didn't catch the word.
Supplanted. I don't know if it exists.
Oh
this word.
no, I think I know what you're trying to say. I think.
Yeah, let's just say replaced. Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, so, it's replaced or surpassed or.
Yeah. So for example, the original Air Factor, if AC1 would have never come out, people would still be playing it because of its modularity and the fact that it was basically the only one that you could completely mod, but it was replaced for AC, and the same would be for AC. So it will last as long as another sim with the same kind of modularity will come, and it goes also for other sims. So for ACC, as long as another title featuring the same kind of cars and so on. So it depends on how the sim has been built, how long it will last. Or we can say, maybe now that comes to mind, we can say that a sim lasts as long as there is interest in it.
Exactly.
Boom.
Notable mention for GTR2, it's been out for 14 years. And it was not made as a moddable platform game, and there are still people playing it today with Power and Glory and other mods today.
Yeah,
so
people
that's
are still
14
playing
years.
Race 07 as well, but not many. But there are still
and
some.
I think the thing is,
about
PC
40.
gaming, it's not at all beyond the realms of possibility to put a brand new graphics engine. So, like the GTRs of this world, and even AC1, the developers have stopped developing those now. So the community's keeping them alive, and they're still alive and still active to a degree. But
Richard Burns Rally's one that's still kicking, isn't it? And Grand Prix 3 still kicking about, or 4.
In theory, a developer could develop a sim title for 20 years. Because as soon as it starts getting dated and new technology for graphics comes out, so things like we've seen like the RTX and all that good stuff, just update the graphics engine. Because physics are physics, and they'll always be physics. They'll never change. So as you get more technology in the PC world, you can insert that technology. As computers are more capable of doing stuff, you can insert that into existing software. You can build the content roster through DLC and add-on content. You could update the graphics engine or the sound engine or the UI or everything. So you can get a game that releases today in 2020. You can continue developing it till 2030. It'll be an entirely different prospect altogether. So realistically, it depends. If a software company wants to make a hardcore simulation, like we've seen with Riser and the original Automobilista that started out as GameStop Car, then went to GameStop Car Extreme, then went to Automobilista 1, you can keep developing that and keep bolting on new technology and new advances quite literally forever. Because, again, if your core basics are right, if your physics engine's correct and you put in numbers in and the game's representing those numbers accurately, physics will always be physics. There'll be more depth to what you can put into it, but as a PC, it's code. You can always add extra depth to existing code bases to represent stuff that you couldn't represent today, to represent tomorrow. So the games that tend to do quick turnaround of a new title tend to be the more accessible franchise stuff like Formula 1, Dirt Rally, and then you get the long burners like the Automobilistas and the R Factors and the Race Room Racing Experience that came out in 2013? They're talking about having Unreal 4 or at the very least DX12. So when the new graphics engine, if the new graphics engine comes out for Race Room, that's going to look an entirely different prospect than what it did in 2013. It already handles entirely differently because they've enhanced what they can do from a physics point of view and the stuff that they simulate. So that has got an infinite lifespan on it until the developers decide to go down a different route and want to release a brand new piece of software, which inevitably will just be what they've learnt up to that point, repackaged and called something new, and then the process will evolve as it would have done if you stayed under the same title. So, yeah, interesting.
So, was that answer more precise than mine, you think?
Don't know, mate. I fell asleep. No, for me personally, I mean, if you look at games consoles, I mean, not necessarily PCs, a games console lifespan's about 10 years, until they release the next one. It doesn't mean that people suddenly stop playing. Because we're now starting to talk about PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox, which I forget what it's called.
Different space, though, consoles, isn't it? Because that is a tangible machine, where a PC's like triggers broom and
but I mean, if you look at that, I personally think if I bought ACC, I want that. Thank you, One X. It's the Xbox One X. I want the game to be developed for a minimum of 5 years. A minimum.
Yeah, for sure.
These days. And I think with a lot of sim racing games, it's not necessarily the games that come out every year. Like, your F1 2020s and so forth, and other... I don't even know when the Gran Turismo game last came out, but that actually has some kind of longevity to credit to it, where credit is due. But again, that's still console relatable because it doesn't come out on PC. But yeah, I would a minimum of 5 years, and like we've said, the Race 2007, and there's still the community picks up these games which have a lot of love. The Grand Prix, Jeff Grammond, was it Grand Prix 3 or 4, whichever one it is. There's still a huge money community out there for that. Richard Burns Rally's got a lot of love. And, so these games still have some fun out there, even after developers disappear or give up the ghost, developing the game. Right. Next question. We've only got a few left. So this one's from Dave Thayer. So this is really for Mr. Jeffrey. Since you talk to developers a lot, I don't know how often you talk to developers, but fairly regularly. What are their feelings? And if you ever discussed it with them, you might not have done. What are their feelings and directions on adding VR to the newer games? And how do they decide which ones will get VR and which ones don't?
Interesting question.
So you can see where this is going. One main developer is Codemasters. They seem to be taking over a lot of the main racing titles, or genres, shall we say, and they didn't add VR, which would be nice if it was included.
The irony to that question, and the answer I'm going to give, is Codemasters are the ones that I've probably got least contact with. So I don't talk to Codemasters very often at all. Normally it's through media agencies.
But so let's think about this. We've got VR in AC. We've got VR in ACC. We've got VR in Auto Ballista 2, because AMS1 came out when VR wasn't even a thing.
R-Factor 2, basically everyone.
R-Factor 2, yeah.
iRacing.
Well, they're your main sim racing geeky type games, aren't they?
I mean, I've spoken, and I shall remain giving no names away. One of the sims that you mentioned there, they had no intention of putting VR on. But they put VR on because it was a commercial decision that our partner needed VR for something they were doing and were willing to pay for it. So that came in through the back door. People like Auto Ballista, for example, they had VR as part. Came in the box. So you
came in the madness engine, didn't it?
R-Factor as well. That were always intended to have virtual reality because that's part of the USP of what they do. So it's really, like you say, it's down to that whole easy access mainstream stuff. VR's not a mainstream piece of hardware. It's not something console users, where the most units are shifted, applies.
Well, Xbox doesn't even have VR, for instance. So PlayStation 4 does, and I think there's talk about there being a newer version of the PlayStation
again,
VR.
Though, it's all a bit dicey compared to PC for the horsepower that they're dealing. So it's unit numbers, it's shifting units again. Traditionally, and I know I'm stereotyping here, so it might not be 100% right, but PC exclusive titles tend to be more for the detail, for the people that are willing to get down and dirty a little bit with it and want maybe not a game, but they want a sim racing experience. And easy access titles tend to generate mostly on console and are about shifting giving a good experience. I'm not belittling them in any way, shape or form, giving them a good experience, but VR doesn't shift units and is usually not working with console. So the motivation for Codemasters, let's say, is this example that you gave us, to put VR into a title is very, very minimal because it's development time. The engine's not natively supporting it. And frankly, it ain't going to shift much in the way of numbers. So it's a cost versus benefit simple, boring spreadsheet of it's going to cost X amount of money to do. We anticipate it's not going to bring that level of return back, or it will, but it's not high enough to make it worth it. Whereas maybe paying for a license of Formula 3 will cost the same kind of money, but shift X number more units. So I'm saddened about it because, as I said at the top of the show, I surprisingly, despite it not being my sort of thing, really like F1 2020. And I think throw a VR headset into that equation. Mamma mia, you've got an amazing experience. That's going to be mind-blowing. F1 2020 in VR would be exceptional. So I'd love to see it, but I don't anticipate it ever happening.
There is a mod out there that I know that got released about 2 or 3 months ago, and very early days, and when people played it, it made them pretty sick. So
what,
you talk about VR legs.
VR into F1? No way.
It is out there. Yeah,
is it proper
out there.
VR though, or is it that thing where it just puts it on a big screen? Is it 3-dimensional depth perception VR, or does it put you in a big screen in the headset like we saw for AMS1 back in the day?
Honestly, it was so long ago that I saw a YouTube video about it, and I know that it's out there, but I haven't revisited it, and to be honest, haven't really paid that much attention. But like I say, it made people feel pretty ill when they used it. So it's still early days, and I'm sure
that's piqued my interest though. That dude, if that's proper 3-dimensional traditional VR, then I want a piece of that for sure. That might be enough for me to dig my Oculus out and start using it again.
I mean, as you know, I have an Oculus as well, and I bought these new shelving units, and I've stupidly blocked one of the VR sensors I need to move, and I'm not that bothered about it now. Like, if it was a year ago, I would have been going VR, but I've kind of not given. I kind of have
you
given up on it a little bit. You just need to fall back in love with it. Get in a Assetto Corsa and an open cockpit car. Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, there were a couple of things that go against VR, and I think the biggest one is the heat that is generated from the headset.
Sure, yeah.
For me, you get very, very hot, and I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but when I race during the summer, my back gets hot and sweaty as it is. I've had to buy some stuff to make my seat smell nice because where I was sweating that much, I started to feel like the seat was starting to stink a little bit because it's like it's not leather, it's like a material. So I bought some
guys
Febreze.
And girls,
like,
don't
well, actually,
buy a
I bought some
second-hand rig off Paul Glover. That's just not going to happen. That's not nice.
She just ruined his business.
And you know, I get a proper sweat on. So let alone putting a VR headset on as well. Because I've upgraded, I know I've talked about, I've upgraded from a Logitech wheel to a CSW 2.5. You know, I am sweating that much more because I've got that much more dynamism from the feedback, a lot more force that I'm fighting with. You know, going back to the force feedback thing earlier on, the question, you know, I've noticed a huge step up going from that wheel to the 2.5, like huge, and it's revolutionized my gaming. God, if I was to go direct drive, I'm sure I'd have another momentous leap as well. But yeah, no, you know, Danny, even you got something you want to add?
Like you were saying before, like Paul Jeffrey.
You're very quiet, Danny. I'd like to point out.
Better. So.
That's better. Learn to use a microphone, my friend.
It's about time. So basically, like Paul Jeffrey said, it's the console games normally shift a lot more units because they're about giving an experience like be a Formula 1 driver. It's more about the whole feeling of the whole life of a driver, not just about driving as fast as possible and save a tenth here and there. That's more for the sim racers. And I think the VR is a bit the same. At least I was amazed by it. And I actually, what I liked the most with the VR was doing oval racing and iRacing, because you're constantly next to cars there. And every time you look left, right, and there's a car there. And that was really, really cool.
You can't beat that.
But after a while, it's still, just like you say, it gets really hot, especially I did a 2-hour stint on R Factor 2 and I said, never again in VR. And it just gets, it's a bit more cumbersome in terms of menus, blah, blah, blah. And then it just wears out. This, I wouldn't call it as far as a gimmick, but this novelty thing wears out. And then when you want to race quite often, and get better. It doesn't really bring, at least to me, doesn't bring anything more that.
Yeah, the button things is definitely a good point. Like seeing buttons on the wheel or seeing buttons on your extra button boxes, and then you hit the wrong. I mean, to be fair, even without wearing a VR headset, I hit the wrong button from time to time anyway. Also, not help when people decide to give me a blooming drive-through.
I think it's just a hassle as well.
Yeah,
it's just a hassle with VR. It's a hassle getting the headset on, the thousands of different cables, and going through the different loading procedures and whatnot. If I could live with a heat because I'd just buy a fan or I'd acquire a cooling mechanism that's appropriate, so I could live with a heat. I'm certainly not bothered whatsoever about the lower resolution. I don't care about that because resolution is not important to me, because the benefits you get from VR are far superior than picture sharpness. For me, it's purely the hassle. And in particular, the reason why I've personally stopped, which is unique to my circumstances, is I don't have a great deal of time to race anymore. And inevitably, whenever I do end up racing, it's when I'm recording something or preparing to record something for RD. So it's just literally not compatible. But if I could get a VR headset, if there was such a thing as a good wireless VR headset where I literally did everything that I normally do to get into a game, and before I press race, I literally put it on my head like a pair of glasses or some comfortable face solution, and I'm in VR and I can go racing, I would never, ever, ever do anything different. But it's not. It's a big thing. It requires storage. It requires plugging in. You've got to boot up through a certain process, and never bloody works.
But even when you do boot it up, it doesn't. You have to reinstall the software because an update's broken it.
And I'm a technical noob, so if something starts going outside,
we know this. Yeah, you're a bit of a simple fella.
It just becomes hassle, and I think that. I mean, ironically, I got sent a Htc Vive that was broken. Nice one, cheers. And that's got like 10,000 leads. That's even worse than Oculus. That was like, honestly, I thought maybe they'd sent me a squid at first because there's that many tentacles coming off it. And that's just a no-go. I'm OCD about cables, so there's no way I'm interested in that. But if we get down to the level where I'm sure we will, where we go wireless or almost wireless, happy days. Happy days.
The problem is with going wireless for VR is it needs the processing power of the PC to do the heavy lifting. Oculus and other brands are doing the inside out tracking stuff, which has its, which is great because it means you haven't got to have your little satellite sensors, but also means that sometimes when you pull your hands to the side and things, like if you're playing like a game where you're having to reload and things, and you some of these games you reload by putting the gun behind your head, because of the sensors locations, it kind of mistracks things. There are pros and cons to whatever setup or whatever system.
They all get better in time, as all technology does, won't it?
It will. It's just it's the heat thing for me, which is the big thing, and also your eyes just start to feel really tight. And for someone that wears glasses, it can also be a little bit cumbersome as
particularly bad for people that wear glasses. Glasses aren't too bad, but glasses are fire. Because there's no R. There's no R. There is no R in glasses.
Oh my god. Right. Okay. On that bombshell, let's move on, shall we? Next one's from. We've got three more. Michelle Bellisi. Since COVID-19 came around, I've never heard of it. There's been a perception that sim racers' popularity has grown. I wonder how you can measure this. For example, did Race Department see a positive increasement in memberships since early March? And has there been an increase in activity on the RD forums? Paul, you're probably best to cover this one.
Thank you for the question, although it's a relatively boring subject, so I'll keep it short. Yes, we saw more visitors, more engagement, a little bit more members, but nothing great shakes. But certainly plenty more visitors. And the biggest test of how much more popular sim racing is post-COVID-19 or mid-COVID-19 is the fact that doors are open to us now that were not open before. So we've got a video that's going to go live at some stage in the near future. I got in touch with Andy Prio, who's, anybody who doesn't know him, three-time World Touring Car, one-time European Touring Car champion, and drives for Ford in GT racing now. I would never have been able to contact him and say, can I have an hour of your time to talk sim racing? But I did, and he's like, yeah, no worries. And I only wanted a short segment from him. We had an hour and a half together, and he was a great guy because sim racing, he was always, his son, Seb, who's also a racer, was always into sim racing, and Andy kind of found it through lockdown and realised just how damn good it is. So that's the biggest test of how much more popular it is. It's now all pretty much socially acceptable in the real world. I mean, I shouldn't really say it, but when we did SRO last year, when we were on site, back in the day when you could travel, I miss those days.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
We did our sim racers that won the podium, the top three, went onto the podium proper. And that was a really cool initiative and a nice experience to stand at Monza, let's say, on the podium. But a bit cringe, and everybody's like not quite sure what to do about it and what sim racing is and why these people are here. That would be totally different, I venture, the next season when we go and we're back on trackside, because it's become acceptable. The real drivers know what it's all about. They're engaging with it and they're interested for the majority and impressed by it for the majority. So it's opened a lot of people's eyes. It's opened a lot of the general public to understand that actually this is not kiddie gaming. This is a pretty hardcore, realistic experience. But most importantly, it's opened the door for brands and for manufacturers and for real-world drivers to think, actually, you know what? I want a piece of this. I mean, just look at what's happening. You've seen all these brands doing official series now. Ferrari, for example, something I'm involved with, started their first ever esports series a couple of weeks ago. That wouldn't have been an opportunity, I don't think, 2 years ago. But they've seen the value in it. They've seen the level of it as well.
And you did the Lamborghini one as well, didn't you?
That sort of thing. The SRO Championships, of course, as well, which is, rather than a brand, is a full series. And we've seen others, the Formula E race at home that we've discussed ad nauseum in the past. And basically, like, pretty much everything. Even Mini UK have running their own series.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and it made me laugh because it made me think about the RD Championship.
The RDT Mini Championship. Everybody's getting involved now, and that's been fabulous, I think, because, I mean, I'm not talking from a position of knowledge here, I'm just making an assumption, but you're seeing simulations that we play are starting to acquire licenses and bring out content that was previously a little bit more difficult to get. Ferrari have come to R Factor 2. I have no idea, I've got no insider knowledge, I have no idea if that's because Ferrari are now more acceptable to sim racing than they would have been back in the day and they actually see benefit in it, or whether it's coincidence or what, but you see it across the board. Ferrari's in iRacing as well, and Project Carter's always been in, of course, but there's a lot more brands appear from the outside looking in to be willing to participate in giving a license to these companies. So that's fantastic. And from Race Department's point of view, obviously as well, we've seen more traffic, which is nice, which shows that people are more interested in learning more in our hobby. At the end of the day, it is an exceptionally good hobby. Otherwise, we wouldn't be giving up our time for nothing, sat here talking about it. It's an exceptionally good hobby, and I think if a motor racing fan can see it and understand it's more than just the stereotype kiddie with a controller in a Lamborghini Huracan with neon lights underneath it going sideways at 300 mile an hour through a field, it's more than that, then I see no reason why they wouldn't convert to it, because it's basically opening up an opportunity for someone who's not rich to go motor racing. And no matter how good or realistic the simulator that you're using is, no matter what hardware you've got, a hard race online against somebody who's the same level you are, going toe-to-toe for 15 laps, it's a phenomenal experience, regardless of what sim it's in. So what's not to like if racing's your thing?
Indeed. We're just going to get Mr. I like to give out drive-throughs like candy bars, Danny Monteiro.
Nice job.
Yes, Danny.
Yeah, basically what I think has helped the most, not only Race Department, but also sim racing as a whole, was that since a lot of the real series got involved in the sim racing, they are now, what is helping and now even more is that they're bringing it out back into the real racing, because they now can relate, they can talk about it in during those moments of racing where there's not much happening. Or the opposite. For example, I don't know if you've watched the 6 hours of Nürburgring, was it last weekend, I think? At some point during the beginning of the race, there were many cars, and of course, at the beginning of the race, 6 hours, so of course everybody's going to go crazy like a sprint race, because that's what drivers do. And that they were like bumper to bumper, like 3-4 cars in a row, and then they were fighting through the first few corners. And the commentator, who is John Watson, which has been in racing for a long time, he even said, it looks like we're watching sim racing. So even if an older guy that just got into learning what the sim racing thing is, being like from the old school guys, like, this computer stuff, even he got like sold, he said, during the SRO series. And then he was saying, looks like sim racing, because the racing was so intense and so close. So that shows that it has had an impact, and it's hopefully gonna grow.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain commentators out there that bang on about the fact you're watching a game, and I wish they would so much. But the likes of John Watson, when he first got introduced to ACC, you could tell he was like, I can't believe this is a game. Like, he genuinely was surprised is probably the word I'm looking for. He was surprised. And, for me, going back to Paul's point earlier on, and I know we probably ram this home again and again and again, we are looking for realism. And when you're watching sim racing, you sometimes don't want to be reminded every 30 seconds that you're watching sim racing. We're looking there for the realism. Don't keep taking me out of the room. Like, talk about it maybe during the introduction or the interval or at the end. But when we're watching the racing, don't take me out of the experience. And I think that's really, really, for me, that's really, really important. So yeah, and anyway, 3 more questions to go. We got this one.
There's
and we
been
got a couple
3
of
more
fun ones
questions to go for the last 5 questions.
No, these are 3. No, these are 3. So, Byro has asked, as a sim racing newbie, what is the best way to get into online events after mainly doing practice runs, AR races, and time trials for a few months?
Join Race Department.
And Sim Racing GP.
Yeah. And?
Simple.
Sim Racing GP. Yeah. And for me, even though I'm not necessarily a rookie, but I am in regards to league racing. I have been taking part in racing events at ACC SS, which has actually been a real experience for me. And they're all run on Sim Racing GP. So keeping it in the family. And as a driver, for me personally, I feel like I have learnt a lot from this experience, because when I've done races before, it's always been about that one race. But when you're in a league, it's about more than that. It's about beating Steve in the championship, which I did.
It's cool though, because it gets you just like the experience you can have in a Formula One game of having your rival driver or your teammate.
And I turned Steve into a rival, which is great.
It gives another dimension to the racing.
Thing is, mate, practice runs are great. AI races are okay, but they're not. You can't beat racing against real people. And as long as you're respectful and you follow the rules and you don't do anything stupid,
and competition advances learning in every single walk of life. Competition. If you want to learn times tables at school, for example, and you're sat studying your book, you'll learn it at a certain speed. But if you've got a mate who you want to beat and you want to learn it quicker than him, a bit of competition, it enhances everything. And going online, like you said, Paul, you might do a league, you might do 1, you might do 10 leagues, and you might be last by a long chalk. But you tick that knowledge box off. You know what this is all about. You know how to behave. You know how to load up.
When I've hosted club races at RD, people would come on and go, I'll be at the back. And I was like, look,
everybody starts at the back by definition. Everybody starts at the back, don't they?
Yeah, but I was like 5-8 seconds off the pace, as where now I'm generally maybe anywhere from half a second to 2.5 seconds off the pace, whatever, depending on the track. Because some tracks I'm just naturally faster at. But don't be scared of going. I would stay away from your general online races.
Don't do public lobbies. They're just soul destroying.
Don't do public lobbies, because that'll just break your heart and just ruin you for life. But join a community, get involved, and I
have
think,
a bit like
of a
you
laugh.
and Danny said, Paul, I think the beauty of joining a community is you're more often than not racing against some of the faces and names that you've raced against previously. So you become more invested in it because you know who Joe and Jane blogs are and stuff. You also build the trust up.
Yeah.
So you know that person X is not going to do something stupid at the breaking point, or they're going to leave. Like in public.
Yeah, or you learn who the stupid person is.
I've raced a lot in the past at RD, and I got in the habit of knowing that if I'm too wide with somebody, we'll be okay because we're both intelligent. I've got into public lobbies and I've put myself in a very clear overtaking position, and then just get punted off because they're idiots. That takes all the fun out of everything. Then that you tar online racing in the same brush that everyone's an idiot, and unfortunately, some people will then revert to that level themselves. But there's nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, more pleasurable than racing against people, irrelevant how fast they are, that are sensible and respectful, like we find at RD and SGP and the various communities within it, where you can have a race with somebody, you can go too wide into T1. Or hey, you and me, Paul, when we used to race together online the clubs, we've been too wide for 2/3 of a lap. And you can race people and you can have a clean fight. And even if, like in real motor racing, you've got enough speed to get up behind them but not enough to overtake, knowing that you're pushing your absolute limit and not even getting alongside, that is mind-blowing fun.
People still are going to make mistakes, and in ACCSS, I made a few, and but
there's making
the
mistakes
person that I've hit or ruined their race, they're annoyed, but they're not as annoyed as I am because I don't like making mistakes. And
everybody makes mistakes, and that's perfectly okay. It's when you're sending it without braking into La Source, and then you're scratching your arse wondering why you took 5 cars out. That's stupidity. Making a mistake and out braking yourself or making contact. That's the nature of the beast, and don't be afraid of that if you're new, because every time you do that, hopefully, one would hope, you take away a lesson from that and you've learned something, and you know that 50-50 scenario in future is just not worth doing at this moment in time.
Yeah, and also there was someone
mistakes,
No, I never do. But there was someone in the Discord going about, I need to get the tire pressures right. But I was like, no, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Like, that's the last thing we'll be worrying about. You want to be putting the laps in. You want to be practicing. You want to be learning how the car behaves, and you want to learn the track. And then the last thing you want to concentrate on is the tire pressures. Yeah, they play a part, but they're not the be and end all. The most important thing is keeping it on the black
stuff. Until you become an expert, until you become an uber alien, then the vast majority of lap time you're going to find in yourself. Always. When you get to
exactly, but it seems that people focus on those kind of details, and I think really
that is a product of playing in isolation. So playing offline or these one-off public hobby lopping, and you realise very quickly when you get into a community or you get into a regular, like we did with your events, Paul, where I joined quite a few of those club events at RD. You very quickly, if you don't already know it, start to realise that actually, when you get to the point where you can lap within 1/10 of your ultimate pace easily for 40 laps, consistently, without ever dropping outside of that window of 1 or 2 tenths, then, good sir, you need to look at your setup to find the extra 3 or 4 tenths per second. But I'd venture that 99% of people with a racing sim aren't at that level. So you will always find more speed in you than you will in your setup. Do the laps, get safe, get clean.
Something that I've really improved on is my trail braking, and that's where I find a lot of time. So, and I owe thanks to Driver 61 for.
But going back to the original question, you learn faster. You're learning, and to be quite honestly, with your enjoyment is accelerated by being in the spirit of competition. And if you're getting last, no matter.
And AI, like especially in ACC, the AI is too predictable. It's not a challenge to get past them because each car just seems to do the same thing each lap.
If you're going online and you're racing regular and you're always last, there's nothing wrong with that. You're always last. You're nowhere near anybody else. That won't last forever. It might do, and if so, unlucky you. But it probably won't last forever. And the second you're not last, the second you beat one of your rivals or you find some lap time or suddenly you're in a fight, even if you don't get involved and don't do anything, but you're in a fight where previously you were not, I guarantee now, mark my words, this is a set in stone guarantee from Paul Jeffrey, the satisfaction you get from that will be 1,000,000 times higher than any satisfaction you'll get in sim racing by seeing a tangible improvement that will trump beating AI at 110% or whatever scenario you find yourself in, hot lapping on a leaderboard and getting the fastest time. Going from being where you're at to step changing up one and racing with somebody or beating somebody is the most. That's why I've spent a lot of money on my gear. That's why I give up basically every minute of my day to do sim racing stuff, because that feeling is untouched. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, dear listener, Mr. Paul Jeffrey is the one that really wants to finish, and but it's amazing that once he starts talking, you just can't get in there to cut him off to make him stop. But in a more serious note, at the beginning of the podcast, I did mention that we had another topic, and the topic that we were going to discuss was about leagues and one-off events and things like that. So, Byro, if you're listening, I would, really be interested for you for the next episode, because I think we'll talk about a lot of stuff that you will find really interesting, and not just for you, but other listeners out there as well, because there are some great things going on right now in the sim racing. We're not talking pros, we're not talking esports, we're talking just for your general sim racing fan, like us, and that's what we are. And I put us in that bracket. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go David Day or Danny on that one, because we're basically running out of time, and I'm looking at the clock, I'm thinking, I really want to get some sleep. And I'm sure you guys are thinking the same.
I want to get some dinner, never mind some sleep.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, it's been another great episode of the podcast. Thank you, dear listeners, for listening. Like I say, next one is going to be, we're going to be talking about leagues and one-off events, and what about practice and all these kind of things, and learn from the guys' experience, and hopefully that you guys can learn something too. So yeah, and as well as that, we'll talk about some of the leagues that are on Sim Racing GP that are going on at the moment. And like I say, I'm taking part in ACCSS. I preferred to drive-throughs a couple of times in this podcast with Danny. Danny gave me a drive-through in an event. And I'm a little bit salty about it still, because it should never have been a drive-through penalty. It should have been a 10-second penalty, and it basically ruined my race. So there we are. But, Danny will learn from that mistake, like you would if you were racing and you hit someone up the arse, like you learn from it, right? And you adapt and you move on. It's just that, unfortunately for him, that I'm holding it against him.
It's okay. It's okay.
But no, I just. Yeah, I know. I just once a joke's with me, that's it. I just keep on running that bad boy. There's a lot of stuff going on there right now. As Paul mentioned, he's involved in the Ferrari esports series. I've seen American Truck have got some announcements. Formula One's obviously been doing back-to-back races recently. Wreckfest has got an update. There's loads of stuff. RC9. R Factor 2. Paul, do you want to quickly tell us about your new job for Studio 397?
I work for Studio 397 now, whoop whoop, which is very exciting.
There you go. Right, brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Obviously, we want to touch on Williams' end of an era at some point as well. Auto Blister 2's had more content. P-Cars 3 has come out, and it's been highly regarded in the sim racing community. Don't forget, you can check out our racing club events that are going on. The ACC Sim Racing Club now is on Sim Racing GP. And it's really good to see on Sim Racing GP. They've also been testing mods for Assetto Corsa 1, which is really good to see. So some of the modded content's coming out. That's tracks and cars and so forth. And it's simracing.gp, just so you know, if you want to check that out. If you are a premium member RD, if you message Bram Hengelveld, or you message myself, or if you message what's his name? I've forgotten his name. Anyway, message somebody and we'll give you an invite for that. And we also got our YouTube channel, our Twitch channel, and we're on all the socials. Just search for Race Department, you'll find us. We also have a Discord channel as well. You'll find details about that at www.racedepartment.com. We're also the forum, and it's not Steve Worrell, it's somebody else, thank you. But Steve Worrell runs ACCSS, and actually he did a thing video, was really, really funny. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Worrell. You have kept me entertained, but also I beat you in the championship, so Unlucky you. And you were ahead of me as well. How does that sound? Does that hurt? I hope so. Davide, thank you very much as always for joining.
Having me.
Yeah, it's been good to hear your voice. Danny, thank you very much, sir.
For you. Thank you.
And Mr. Jeffrey, thank you for your ever your ramblings.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to register for Ferrari Esport Hublot Series at www.ferrariesportseries.gg for the next round at Barcelona. There you go.
He's got very corporate. Have you noticed, guys? He's got very corporate lately. He's a changed
Ferrari
man.
Polo
He's a
shirt in
changed
front of
man.
me, and I'm yours.
Well, thank you very much, dear listener. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We're probably coming up now to about an hour and 45 minutes, so it is a long one. We haven't been around for a while, but thank you very much. Do subscribe. Do leave us a review on the platforms where you can leave us reviews. Apple is one of them. I know more and more, like Acast now, you can do reviews and so forth. There's more and more. But thank you very much. Like I say, don't forget, check us out on socials, check us out on YouTube, etc., etc. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. I've been Paul Glover. This has been the Race Department Podcast. Cheerio.